Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Being at Peace with Food webinar with Brandt Passalacqua, founder of Peaceful Weight Loss Through Yoga and author of the new CD, Being at Peace with Food. Brandt will guide us today through some of the basic concepts and exercises in his approach to mindful, effective weight loss as detailed in Being at Peace with Food. Brandt will also answer questions at the end of the broadcast. Throughout the broadcast, if you have any questions for Brandt, please type them in the Q&A pod on the lower right of your screen. A bit about More Than Sound. We're a production and publishing company dedicated to mindfulness and conscious leadership, two areas we feel are of vital importance to our personal and collective development. We're online at morethansound.net. So, without further ado, Brandt Passalacqua.
So, this CD is intended to help you find a method or a process in which you can find your way out of whatever sticky situation you're in. And just as a little bit of full disclosure, I got to this work from having some problems of my own with food, and I lost quite a bit of weight in the process. So that's how I sort of stumbled into this work, and now I work as a yoga therapist and mainly working with people on food issues. And the one thing that is really stand out to me after working with so many people is that there are so many different ways in which we can be having a hard time with nourishing ourselves, our relationship with food, our relationships with our bodies, and the way in which that all plays out. I have seen and worked with people who are absolutely horrified with the way they look. I have seen and worked with people who are completely fine with the way they look, but are not happy with their health. I've worked with people who were significantly overweight, people significantly underweight, people who weren't either, and basically spend what has been described to me as each and every moment of every day obsessing or being not as happy as they could be around food. So it takes up, in some ways, way too much space in many of our lives. So hopefully in this seminar, I'll be able to just give you an overview of the process and the way I think about how to work with this really common problem. And at this point, in my opinion, it's about 50 to 70% of our population. So this is not something that, if you are struggling, you should feel that is unique to you. It's your unique experience, but this issue basically is, at this point in our society, what you would call normal. And I think that's a little bit reassuring, just in that if you're having a struggle, one thing that may help is that your struggle is also someone else's struggle, and there is a way out. And the fact that you've gotten into this predicament with food and possibly your own thinking around it is not your fault. At least that's what I tell myself every day. So just a quick kind of overview of the CD, and I have a 5-week training coming up next week. And basically, these tracks on the CD and in the training are all really designed to help you really do all the work you would do before you really dived into what you were eating. So obviously, especially if you're overweight or you're having problems, you're underweight and having problems, obviously food is a huge component. But the problem is that usually we are asked to, or our own inclination is to look at food directly and sort of try to change our eating behaviors. And that makes a lot of sense. There's a logic to it. But the real problem is that it doesn't work. So, one of the advantages, I sort of feel I have, after doing this so long, is just seeing so many people and confirming this premise that, if you begin your process of getting out of a difficult relationship with food by thinking about food, it will not work. And instead, we have to change our thinking, change our negative mindsets around the way in which we take care of ourselves and feed ourselves. And that is, it's a tall order, but it is definitely not impossible. As we figure out how to very gradually move away from that way of thinking, right? As we sort of heal ourselves, we begin to really notice that a lot of behaviors that we thought, were the problem were actually just a symptom. And many, many difficult food behaviors actually begin to resolve themselves when you work through the process I'm describing. I've seen it over and over and over again. I should also say it is not a super quick process. Most people will spend anywhere between, on the lowest end, a year, but usually a couple of years or 3 years working through their stuff with this. The good news is at the end of that, there's a lot more energy freed up for thinking about other things besides what you're going to eat or not eat next. So I think I'd like to sort of start looking at this process with maybe the most obvious question, which would be, where do I start? And that is probably the best question you can ask yourself, because if you start at the wrong point in the process, and wrong being a place that's sort of ahead of where you're actually at, you won't address some fundamental things that are before that, and they're going to rear up and, get you in the end. So, my experience has been, it's probably the most important thing is cultivating a sense of present-centered thinking and starting from where you are and reminding yourself. Most of the things I'll say today, you probably actually already know, but what's important to do is to realize that we have to be reminded over and over before they take root. So the most important thing is to remind yourself that change is incremental, one, and two, that you don't actually have to get completely, quote unquote, better. So what I mean by that is that you're really looking at percentages. So it is possible, and I would say maybe even likely, that if you have a really difficult relationship with food, it's going to take a lot of work. And if you think that you're going to never have negative thoughts or emotions or behaviors around food again, that's probably not true. That's been my personal experience, as well as the experience of many, many, many of my clients. So really what you want to look to do is to have those difficult thoughts, emotions, behaviors rearing their ugly head less. And the way to do that is to have other sets of thoughts and emotions, etc., right, in your space more. So if you cultivate a state of really understanding that it is not your job to be perfect, and however, it is your job to be in a process that moves you more towards where you want to be. And if you do that, things will get much easier for you. So that's one sort of fundamental piece. And then really the way we begin our process from where we are is to actually cultivate this present-centered thinking and not think too far in the future. So a quick example, if you're trying to lose a lot of weight, right? Having weight loss goals at the beginning of your process, or even let's just say at the beginning of your day as you're thinking about it, is not that beneficial. You probably know this already because you've probably tried this. So you wake up in the morning and you tell yourself you're going to be 50 pounds lighter by some date, or this is the week you're going to lose weight, et cetera, et cetera. Most likely that's not either working, or it has worked in the past for a short period of time. And then, statistically, most people gain more weight back than they lose when they start from simply, I'm going to lose some weight. So I'd like us to collectively just do a really short exercise. And it's a very simple exercise. If you're sitting in a chair, have your feet on the floor. It's okay if you're sitting cross-legged. Rise your spine tall. And find your breath. So you can have your eyes open or closed, but soften your gaze if they're open. And next time you breathe in, feel your breath move into your body. And as you breathe out, feel your breath move out of your body. And repeat this a few times, feeling the breath move in. Notice where in your torso you feel the breath. And then breathe out. Notice how you shift and change as you exhale. Again, just a few more breaths, feeling the breath move in and out. And then next time you inhale, just say to yourself, I am. And the next time you exhale, say here. We'll continue that. Breathing in, I am. Breathing out, here. Maybe 3 more breaths just like that. Inhaling, I am. Exhaling, here. Good. And maybe a slightly bigger inhalation. And a full breath out your mouth. Just let the breath out. So if you've done any breath work or meditated ever in your life, this is a incredibly simple exercise and incredibly short exercise. But interestingly, I've worked with people who have really extensive practices. And although we do all sorts of practice, to help people ground and get to where they want to go, these very, very short practices where you ground yourself and encourage present-centered thinking are extremely helpful because they help us start from where we are. And they move us out of ways of thinking and states of mind that have nothing to do with the present. And what's so interesting is that food, because it's so rooted in eating, in the very base of our reptilian brain, sort of does a little end around maybe some other work we've done to stay in the present. And it's always amazing to me, I will just use myself as an example first, where you spend lots and lots of time doing mindfulness practices or meditating, and then they have such a great effect on your life in general, but it would be very easy to then overeat or to undereat or to have lots of judgments about the way you feel or look. And really, that's also fairly normal. And it is because the roots of our thinking and emotional states around eating are deeper than some other things, because it starts from such a sort of basic human place and is tied up in our survival instincts. So to ground yourself very regularly, many times a day, is a excellent technique to really help you in this process. And again, I'll just sort of point back to what I was saying earlier, in that probably wouldn't be obvious to really anyone, going into this process. I mean, when I first thought about losing weight, I didn't think, well, I've got an idea. I'll sit still and I'll breathe a little and then I'll lose 100 pounds. That's not how we are usually taught, and it's not how we usually work, right? But strangely enough, and we'll go into some of the reasons why in 1 second, but strangely enough, that actually tends to work. And that doesn't mean you don't have to do any other modification. It doesn't mean, obviously, if you want to lose weight, you would have to eat less, most likely, or at least differently. But the process all starts from here and now. And I think the first component of that is because when you're in the here and now, you begin to reduce your stress levels. And there's a lot of talk now about what a bad idea stress is, right? And it's true. What I think is sometimes missing is the reason why it's bad, and what you would, as a normal person living in the world, would need to do about it. So I think the first thing to realize is that there are many internal and external stressors. And for many of them, you can't do anything about it. So in a moment, I will talk about some of them we can change. But generally, we're really looking to retrain our physical system so that it doesn't have a fight or flight response or a stress response to everyday situations. So there's probably no way, let's say, you're going to start up getting your kid to school in the morning and realizing you're late and there's a tractor in front of you, so you're going 5 miles an hour, or whatever your morning stressor is, right? But you can change how you react to it. And that in itself is probably a good thing, will make your life more pleasant. But in terms of changing how you're working with food, the fight or flight response is really not beneficial to weight management. So for those of you that are overweight, stress is probably the worst enemy of weight loss. It causes hormonal changes that, long story short, cause us, right, to keep fat on our bodies. So obviously, that's not a good idea. And then on top of that, the mental states, as we all know, the mental states that come up when we are stressed are not really beneficial if we are stress eaters, right? So really, there's no upside to stress, which is really interesting if you think about it, because many of the things we do or many of the things most people do when they are trying to change their relationship with food are stressful. So some examples are exercise that you don't like, eating foods that you don't like, sort of thinking or obsessing on food throughout your day so much that it's stressful, right? Like all these things, they're not helping us. So, traditionally, if you say, well, how do I manage my weight? Somebody will say, well, basically go to the gym, work out a whole bunch, and eat this diet that you don't like. And so you try that, and, you do it for a little while, and, there's a little boost possibly because you actually did something that was hard, and all of us like to overcome hardship. But the reality is overcoming hardship as a lifestyle, is extremely stressful and not that fun. So what generally happens is you do that for a while, and then you get kind of burned out on this idea that every morning you do some bunch of things you don't like, and then you stop doing them. All that stress, in addition, has made it harder for you to lose weight. Right? And now you've set up a situation where you're totally stressed out because you've stopped doing the stressful things that you think you should be doing. If that makes sense. So if there's anything you could really take away from this hour here, it would be if you can reduce your stress levels, you're probably, significantly, you are probably, I'll just say, a third of the way to where you want to be. That's how important this de-stressing part is. And it's always interesting to me that weight loss plans don't begin with this. They often tell you to be less stressed, but they actually give you very few tools other than exercise, which can lead to less stress. So exercise can be a really useful thing. But other than that, they don't give us much. If you're on the other end of the spectrum, my experience has been that often we get caught up in a sort of obsessive kind of frame of mind where we believe that if we, let's say, stop exercising all the time, that we will gain weight and it won't be good, or that, if we don't constantly think about how we're eating, that things will spiral out of control. So again, probably the biggest piece of work you can do is to begin this process if you haven't already. And I know some of you listening are longtime meditators. So if you're a longtime meditator, I just want to sort of point out that we're going to do another really short exercise, and it's basically breath work. So we can put some of these exercises into meditation techniques, or you can look at them as breath work. But either way, almost all of them will have a component of grounding you into your body and actually using your breath to change your nervous system response. So a lot of longtime meditators I've worked with who are from traditions where breath isn't really a key component, well, they're very impressive and have healed many of their difficult mental states through meditating. But it's not the same as continuously teaching your body, right, to turn on your parasympathetic or your relaxation response through breath work. So just so we have a taste of it, let's just do a couple moments of breathing. And for those of you that haven't done this before, the main thing here, right, is getting in touch with your breath and learning how to relax your breath. So when you have a natural relaxed breath, your abdomen will expand and your breath will be full and your diaphragm will drop completely and your nervous system response will change. So I'm going to walk you through how to do that. If this is difficult for you, I just want to say before we start that that's okay. And one, this exercise would be better done lying on your back. And two, it's perfectly okay to simply watch your breath and just notice what happens until you're able to do this exercise. So I'm assuming most of us are sitting. I can't see you, but that would be my guess. So if you're sitting, take your hands and place your hands on your abdomen. And again, if you're more familiar with this, the feeling is a real relaxation in your belly and then all the way down to your pelvic floor. So you're sort of dropping in to the lower part of your body. And what I'd like us all to do is take a big breath in and hold your breath for a moment. And then we're all going to exhale and pull your navel towards your spine. So your abdominal muscles come in. We're going to breathe out. And then as you inhale, simply relax your belly so your belly moves into your hands a bit. and the air just comes rushing in down towards your abdomen. And then a full, complete breath out, navel towards the spine. Relax the belly as the air comes in. Navel towards the spine as you breathe out. So let's take a few more breaths like that. Taking nice full breaths, but not so big that you feel any strain at all. Breathing in, belly expands. Breathing out, belly contracts. Nice full breath in without strain, relaxing the abdomen. And a nice complete breath out with just a little help from your abdominal muscles. 2 more breaths just like that. Inhaling, expanding. Exhaling, releasing. Inhaling, nice relaxed breath. And then as you're ready, a full, complete exhalation. And then just let your breath go. You might sigh once or twice, then your breath will just come back to normal. Now, normal is an interesting word because ideally normal would be a smaller version of this breath. So what we're looking to do is to cultivate a normal breathing pattern where our belly relaxes as we inhale, right? And just slightly contracts as we breathe out. Breath is really interesting because this breathing pattern will immediately, you might be feeling it now, turn on your rest, digest, heal parasympathetic nervous system and move you towards the level of stress you want to be living at, which is not very much. So, sort of obviously, I suppose, this is not what's happening, right? When you're driving in a traffic jam and you're late for work. It is so, I would say it's almost counterintuitive to remember, right? To do this when you are stressed, right? So that's not the idea here. The idea here is that there are many possibilities, but there's many breath and grounding and meditation exercises one could do that cultivates this nervous system state when things are going relatively well. And so that when a large stressor comes up, we react to that large stressor and then we go right back to our relaxed state. On the CD, there are a whole, there's several tracks, and some of them sort of revolve around this, around food, or around these ideas. So we sort of gradually build towards working directly with food. But we do not just walk right in, say, okay, having a really hard day and I just opened the refrigerator and there is, a chocolate cake in the refrigerator and I'm going to start breathing and everything's going to be okay. Because as we all know, any of us that have like tricky food behaviors, that probably isn't going to work. It'd be great if it did. And if it does work for you, just completely ignore me and go about your business and do what works. But for most people, that doesn't work. So the process is about cultivating, right, this state. And this state has to do with your body. So the body is your ally, and this is something that you might not be feeling right now. So no matter what your relationship is to the body, your body, one thing to consider is that by slowly working yourself, what sometimes people talk about being more in your body, which is kind of inspecific, but we're working towards being more sort of in touch with how we feel going about our everyday activities, including breathing. And the more you do that, the more grounded you're going to be, and the more you're going to be on your way, right, to changing these difficult states that you're encountering. I didn't mention this earlier on, but in my day-to-day life, I have a private practice, and I've worked with, at this point, it's not including seminars, just one-on-one, probably 350 people now. And what is just so inspiring is that when people begin, right, to cultivate a relationship with their body where they can ground, right, feel their breath and feel their bodies, right, their eating behaviors begin to shift. They don't completely heal from that, but they begin to shift. And a lot of the times in private practice, my job is really to remind people that this gradual progression is happening, because you will not remember. You will not remember if you are binging twice a day and you start this process and you do the exercises on the CD and you're like, okay, this guy says, this will work, I'll give it a shot. And, you might find yourself binging once a day 3 months later. And most likely, here's what I want to share with you, is that you won't remember that you binged twice a day. It is a very strange thing. It's how our minds work. And so often in private practice, it's my job to remind people. So if you're working with yourself, I just want to remind you that that's how it's going to move. And if you're looking to figure out how you're making progress, you might want to keep some notes or a journal or something, just so you can look back. Even just write a letter to yourself, and then write a letter to yourself 6 months later, see where you're at, and then compare them. And you will see that if you work in this way, gradually things will shift. I have a lot more to say about, actively losing weight and actively negotiating how you deal with your, if you have an eating disorder. So I'm not saying it's just a simple matter of breathing and everything will work itself out. It's not magic. But what I want to share in this seminar is that these are the foundational things that need to happen if you want to get from A to B. So if you're having a hard time now and you want to wake up 2 years later and be a much better place, in addition to some other things, these things need to be happening. So I have a couple questions here I just wanted to address because they're on that subject. One is, somebody asked, how do you help people calm down when they're in a food crisis? And I think that's a great question. And, the answer is actually, what do you do after your food crisis, or what I often refer to as like your bad behavior? So if something happens, it's not so much about what's happening. Once you're in a behavior, that's probably going to play itself out. Again, counterintuitive, because when you see yourself behaving badly, you tend to want to stop it, and it's perfectly fine to try. However, what's more important is what you do the next day when you wake up. So if you have an instance of binging and purging, let's say, tonight, and you wake up, in the morning, the main thing, if you can remember me saying this even, just remember these words sort of right, like it's not about last night, it's what I do from here. Because again, everything's in increments and percentages. So what you're looking for is a gradual reduction in your behaviors. Another question that was asked is how do I know where I am in my process? And that's actually a great question because, you know, obviously everyone's in a different place. But I guess the big question would be this. If you are, I guess the question would be this. Ask yourself if on a regular basis you are grounding yourself, if you have some sort of practice or practices, you know, whether they're relaxation practices or breathing practices that are working for you, that you feel that when you engage in these practices, you're seeing basically a significant change in your feeling of well-being. If that is happening, right, then you are, I would say, sort of ready to begin looking at actually changing directly behaviors. In other words, like looking at what you're eating, how much you're eating, you know, your plan around food. And unfortunately, in this one seminar, I don't have the time to go into all of those things. But in terms of like sort of the scope, if you haven't done this part yet, I would suggest just holding off a little while, right? And sort of plugging into this part of the process, which is the de-stressing, grounding, and, you know, on the CD we just did, for some reason right now I'm forgetting how many tracks there are, but each track, these tracks are all designed, you know, to get you from 7 tracks, 8 tracks. These are designed to get you to the point where you can more directly address your difficult behaviors and also support you in addressing them. You know, you might have other things you do as well, so it's not in lieu of them. So it's not to say that anything else you're doing that feels like it's working is legitimate. So I would even say that most of this work is an adjunct, you know, to many other ways of thinking. The only difference with this work is if you're struggling through trying like to eat less, let's say, or to exercise a very large amount, it is my opinion that those things are generally not successful. And, you know, if we look around the country and look at, you know, the obesity epidemic, I think that's bearing out to be true. Let's see. Another question was, what do I think about dieting? Which is a good question. Again, dieting is something that generally would come at the end of your process. So first we consider how to de-stress and how to ground ourselves. And then we consider what things in our lives would also help us with that. So let me just pause for a minute or take a side here and talk about a couple of those things. And some of this is addressed on the CD. Sleep is key, right? Because you're not going to be less stressed if you're not sleeping. On the CD, there's an exercise, some relaxation exercise to help you with that. Also, just general organization, so scheduling and general organization of your day. So the more clear you are, you know, humans are funny. The more we know what we're supposed to be doing, the happier we are. So often we have this kind of false sense of freedom. Oh, you know, I'll do whatever today. And that's great if you're taking a day off. I'm not saying that's not fun. But in general, human beings are happier with some sort of system or schedule. So that includes what time you go to bed and wake up, right? You know, generally what you're supposed to be doing today, which would include meal times. So there's a statistic that, I'm not remembering now, but this is I can't remember how many percent of meals are eaten in cars now, but it's something crazy, like 40%, 50% of meals are eaten in cars. Obviously, this isn't conducive to a relaxed way of eating. And look, I've eaten in the car. We all eat in the car. But the point is that our schedules have gotten so tight that they're not moving smoothly. So sort of driving through the Dunkin' Donuts drive-through and grabbing something, rushing to work, right, is not relaxing. So as we get our schedule together, meal times emerge, and we sort of figure out when we should be eating, when we should be snacking, maybe what kinds of things we would need to do to have those snacks around. So I'm not talking so much about what to eat or changing our whole thoughts around nutrition or anything, just simply time and space to eat, time and space, right, to do our practices, which would mean maybe even alarming yourself, on your smartphone, so that you take some breaths into your belly every couple hours, or feel your feet on the floor and do the I am exercise, I am here exercise. So things like that, where we sort of get our lifestyle stuff together, right? And then we start looking at our food, seeing how we should be eating, kind of working with ourselves to figure out, what foods basically leave us feeling calm and energized. And then if we have excess weight on us, after all that, everything's going well, we feel great, we're eating regularly, everything's going well, then, the question is, well, if I want to lose weight, what do I do? And there's a lot to say about dieting, but what I think about dieting is that's the place where it goes. Then you say to yourself, well, if I ate less calories, for instance, there's many ways to think about dieting, but if I ate less calories, for instance, now that I'm feeling calm and my life is going, reasonably well in terms of like this scheduled well, and I'm sleeping and I'm more grounded, now I realize that probably I should eat a different kind of dinner every day. So that's where the dieting would land. So I have a question here. What kind of exercise is best for de-stressing, which I think is actually a really good question, because it kind of points to our next thing, which is, the best exercise, right, the best exercise for stress reduction is the one that leaves you feeling less stressed. Which, it sounds really obvious, but that is not how most of us function. So, if you go to the gym and you're on the elliptical, which I've done, and you're on the thing and you look down and you're looking at how many calories burned. If you're in that sort of world, then it would seem obvious, right, that the more calories you burn, the better. But it's not really true. And it's not true because that, even though it will burn calories, won't change your fundamental relationship with food, right? So what you're really trying to do is make yourself okay with eating in your body. So that is different than burning as much calories so you'll lose weight. And one way to kind of think about this is, if you go with that system of calorie burning, it will eventually fail you, most likely. I mean, if you're a pretty serious athlete, I guess you might be able to pull it off. But unless you're going to do CrossFit 5 hours a day, really, at some point, you won't be able to burn enough calories, right, to match your intake. So the problems are really either around food or around the fact that, we are not okay with eating, right? So for many of us, no matter how we eat or what we eat, there is a negative voice, right? Something is wrong, or we could do better, right? And I'm not saying that there aren't better ways for probably everyone to eat, but that all has to be considered in the context of your life. So sort of obsessing more and more and more on what's going in your body in this way is not conducive to a peaceful life. So more important is to find some sort of movement, right, that leaves you feeling less stressed. And look, for a lot of people, there are plenty of people in this world that running, for instance, would be the perfect thing. But what you need to ask yourself is, how can I run in a way that, in general, leaves me feeling better? Not just the jazzed runner's high, which is fun, but also in general. Like, am I less stressed? And am I less reactive? And am I noticing over time that I am less likely to react to myself when making food choices, right, or thinking about food? So that's kind of that I think is your guideline. There's another question here that's, I think, a good one about the sort of roller coaster effect of all this. So the question is, when you're used to the roller coaster ride with your body and food, how do you know if this process is different or if it's working? So for many of us, right? I mean, if you've been dieting or trying to get yourself not to eat for the past 25 years, right? You're normal. It's going to be very normal for you to kind of like be in and out of it, and to have extreme instances of extremity, right, around food or exercise, and mental states. So I think emotionally, you would see this process is working more in your emotional states than in your external behaviors. So what you're looking for is, all of a sudden, this is the experience that's been described to me by many of my clients, so I'll share it with you. I remember one client said to me, look, it's so interesting. This is the first week where I actually had whole mornings, so not whole days, right? Whole mornings where I didn't really even think about food. I ate breakfast and then I ate my lunch. Or, this is the first week I've ever been through where I didn't feel tortured, around my eating. Now, that is not the same as I ate perfectly. They're completely different. One of the exercises I have on the CD is an exercise in which we move our body and breath together. And it's it's a piece of the yoga I teach for weight loss. And the reason we move body and breath together, right, is to shift our emotional states. So not only is breath good for de-stressing in terms of a nervous system way, moving the body and breath is also good for a quick shift from one emotional state to the other. So, ideally, you would flow through emotional states nice and easy. You'd get mad, and then that would pass, rather quickly, and then you get sad, and that would pass rather quickly, and then you feel, calm and at peace, and maybe that ends at some point, and you just sort of go throughout your day. But the fluctuations, because they're moving easily, right, don't bother you so much. But that's not our experience a lot of the time. A lot of the time we get stuck. And, there are lots of ways to work with this stuckness. But I believe that the quickest way is to move and breathe. So let's do that just for 2 minutes. Let's just move and breathe. Very similar to our breathing exercise, but this time I'd just like you to use your arms. So lengthen your spine if you're sitting in a chair. You don't even have to stand up. As you inhale, raise your arms up alongside your ears. And as you exhale, release your arms down by your sides. We're going to continue to do this, and we're going to see if we can have our breath be bigger than the movement. So what that means is, as my arms rise up, I'm breathing in, I'm breathing in, I'm breathing in. I continue to breathe in a little bit once my arms are up. And then as I exhale, my arms come down by my sides, and I have a little breath left to come out when my arms are already down. Let's take 4 or 5 more breaths like this. Nice and easy inhaling. Doesn't have to be the biggest inhale you ever made. Nice and easy exhale. A little breath left when the arms are down. Inhaling, rise the arms up. Exhale, release the arms. Full breath out. Breath is bigger than the movement. Nice and relaxed inhale. Ribs spread to the side. Air comes in easily. Exhale, release the arms. Two more on your own, any speed. Inhaling, a little bit of inhale left at the end. And exhaling, a little bit of breath left at the end. Release your breath completely. Notice your emotional state. Even label your emotional state. So for me, it's kind of interesting working with so many people. It's nice for me because I get to see, many different people's experiences. And there are so many different experiences of this. But a very large percentage of people can move their emotional states to things they would identify as emotional states they don't want, what I would call more sticky emotional states, into more content emotional states. Simply by moving and breathing. So there's a lot of other questions here. They all revolve, it's interesting, I'm looking at the questions, they all revolve. For me, it feels like, they all revolve around the same ideas. So how can I stop reverting to bad habits or thought patterns? How do I do this work when, I have family or a life partner, that's around, and I'm assuming the backstory of that is not as supportive as I would want them to be, right? This work, and your process is your own. And, I started by saying, look, you're not alone. There are so many people experiencing, right, the similar problems. And what I'd like to share really is that the way out is by actually engaging in process. Right? If you engage with it, you will be on your way, right, to being at peace with food. There's not a magic bullet or pill, which we would all like, but it actually doesn't exist. But by finding your way towards peacefulness, contentment, more content feelings throughout your day, you're going to be on your way. And I can promise that if you find yourself, participating in your own process in that way, no matter how difficult it sometimes feels, you will make incremental changes, right? So by continuously de-stressing, by continuously practicing a way that leaves you feeling more content, right? By moving in a way that leaves you feeling more content. By grounding yourself into your body on a regular basis. By cultivating present-centered thinking and by reminding yourself that change is always incremental and actually doesn't have an end, and that is a good thing. If you do these things and you do them consistently, you will find that you will have the clarity to make choices that benefit you. And that's really what this is about. Because in the end, whether you're trying to lose weight or you're trying to choose to, get yourself to eat more, or you're trying to choose to stop yourself from binging and purging, right? It's all about choice. And the way we cultivate the inner reserves, and I would say the ability to change our brains, right, our minds, so that we can actually do these things, is through consistent and clear practice that brings us into the present and leaves us feeling less stressed. So I hope if you're watching this that you find something here that's useful. Everyone is different, but hopefully there will be one idea or kernel that is useful. If you need help with this, I think there's information on your screen. I was really happy to do this CD because I've been trying to sort of put these practices in one place. And then we have lots of other work available. But even if you're already engaged in another process, I would say consider whether that process has these elements in it, and if it doesn't, add it in. Right? So there's no reason you can't do all this and go to Weight Watchers or whatever other system seems useful to you. So thank you for taking the time to spend some time with me. I really appreciate it, and I hope to hear from you or see you soon. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us today. To pre-order the Being at Peace with Food CD, please visit morethansound.net. Thanks again.